Alright, so we've gone over what Covenant you should be for Frost Mage, coming 9.1.5, we've gone over what spec you should play for each of the dungeons. Now it's time to talk to you about what you need to multi-spec in 9.1.5. So what gear do you need to play Fire, Arcane, or Frost? I'll have the individual specs broken down on the timeline of the video if you want to skip ahead to whichever one you care about. So for Fire, this is a spec that you're going to want to craft 2 legendaries for. You need Disciplinary Command and you need Sun King's Blessing, depends on what situation you're going for. You primarily use Disciplinary Command, mainly in Mythic Plus, and you primarily use Sun King's Blessing, mainly in raids. But for the gear that you'll need, you'll want to get an Orb of Torment from Remnant of Ner'zhul from Heroic or Mythic if you'd swing that, because that's our best on-use trinket in raid. And then you'll also want to get the Arcane Gear from the Eye on Heroic or Mythic. And a lot of groups can plug this right now, so Mythic is within reach probably if you have AOTC. This is our second best trinket in pretty much every situation to wear with the Ner'zhul trinket or the other trinkets I might mention after this. If you're mainly focusing on dungeons, then you should definitely try and get a badge from PP, because that is the best on-use trinket to use when you are using Kindling, which is what you run in Mythic Plus. And you would replace your Orb of Torment with that. And it's not worth using an R badge that's item level 216 over like a 246 IQD, okay? But, you know, both of those options are a worse choice than having a 233 or higher PP badge. So don't use an item level 200 badge if you had 246 IQD. It's not worth it. But yeah. An alternative to Oculogland if you don't raid is Unbound Changeling or Indivisible Ooze, and that's from Mist and Playful respectively, but both are worse than Gland, especially because Changeling is so random, it only has about a 20% uptime, so you aren't really guaranteed to have its effect in Combust like you are with Gland. And Ooze does literally nothing for Combust, and it's just here because it's a good single target damage trinket, so you'd want to avoid that in favor of something that would buff Combust. And then the stats generally that you'll want to aim for Fire. Haste is really big for Fire, and you'll want more of it than you have as Frost or Arcane. Ideally, you'll want like around 25% haste with Disciplinary Command, around 30% with SKB or Sun King's Blessing. That's what's pretty common. And then after that, you can either go into Mastery or Versatility. First is a better option for AoE, and Mastery is a bit better in single target, so you could opt to craft your Sun King's Blessing as Haste Mastery and your Disciplinary Command Haste first. But you should sim yourself to see what certain haste or crit or mastery verse you want, but that is just a general rule to aim for. So Arcane, this one, I think most people know what trinket is synonymous with Arcane. That's Soul Egg Ruby. You're gonna want that from Theater of Pain, notorious for its low drop rate, or at least that people just bang their heads against the wall enough for enough specs that people hate it. So yeah, that's your bread and butter, right? Soul Egg Ruby. Arcane doesn't work great without it. It needs the crit for Kyrian. You would use it with every other arcane power and treat it as a 3-minute cooldown. For your second trinket, you would go either Ocular Gland from the Eye again, as we mentioned in the Fire section, or you can get the Forbidden Necromantic Tome from Kel'Thuzad. That's also a great choice. Alternatives to those are using IQD, Imperial Ordnance from Spires, or Unbound Changeling, again from Mists. And some Arcane Mages opt for using a double on-use build, like say Soul Egg Ruby and IQD, so they can use an on-use with every arcane power. Personally, in at least Mythic Plus, I would recommend against it, because just getting the passive damage is great for when you're not in your cooldowns. For Arcane, the only real option you have is Arcane Harmony. You can technically run Arcane Bombardment, but just run Arcane Harmony if you're playing Kyrian Arcane. That's really the only solidified Arcane playstyle right now. Maybe more things will come out about Venthyr Arcane and Evocation Legendary, Safe and Storm, after 9.1.5 comes out, but for now, Kyrian Arcane, Arcane Harmony is what you want to make. So for the stats, Arcane's a bit weird, but generally Mastery, Crit, and Verse are equal, with Haste being a lot lower, because as Kyrian Arcane, you really just want to hover around 9 to 15% Haste, because that's just what you can do to make sure that you can land your barrage and your touch of the Magi window. So that will depend mostly on personal preference. You'll probably want higher haste if you are less familiar with your arcane rotation or anything like that. But you will most likely get most of the crit you need from your trinkets, so that's why Mastery and Burst are up there as well, even though crit is very important. You should definitely sim your gear again. I'm just gonna keep saying that because simming is very important, but crit is very high for arcane. Now Frost is pretty simple. You'll want to get the Indivisible Ooze from Plaguefall. You can also get the Unbound Changeling from Mist. You can get Ocular Gland from the Eye, or you can get Necromantic Tome from Kel'Thuzad. And a varying combination of those will be your best trinket, and you just need to sim them to see what the combination is. And those will also affect your stats. So generally, a good baseline for Frost to aim for is to have around 30% crit and over 20% haste. And then you want as little mastery as humanly possible. And then verse is a good stat for AoE. It's better than haste and AoE. You'll need to sim yourself though, because as I said, your trinkets vary the amount of haste or crit that you want to have. And if you're going for a higher target count, it's worth losing some of the haste to get verse. But crit is always very good in AoE, regardless of the situation. The legendary that you'll want for Mage is Freezing Winds. This might change a bit in 9.1.5. But for now, just go Freezing Winds. It's your best all-arounder. If you're going to do more raid-focused content, Slick Ice is probably going to come into play more next year. It's not in use for many fights this tier. It's only 2. And Glacial Fragments might make a comeback being uncapped, but we don't know that yet. So just aim for Freezing Winds. So there you go. Hopefully that helped you plan out what you need to start grinding Mythic +4 now, as you still got about a week and a half before 9.1.5 comes out. Personally, you know, I've been doing Torghast again because I need to make some legendaries. But yeah, not too bad. I managed to get my Soul Light Ruby, which is the worst part of it, and a badge, which is not max level, but that's okay. So, good luck on getting your gear, and your mage will be pumping at 9.1.5. So, have a good rest of your week.